Hello everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I'm building the Estes converter. Now this kit is currently out of production. I got it with a whole bunch of other kits I just bought en masse. But the idea here is that the different sections can be screwed together or taken apart, and so you can have a short rocket or a tall rocket or a rocket in between there. So let's go ahead and open this up and see what we've got. Okay, we've got some body tubes here and a whole bunch of plastic pieces, and somewhere in here we should have the instructions. Here we go. Alright, so this is meant to go together fairly quickly. So we've got a total of 4 body tubes here. 3 of which should be the same size and 1 is a little bit longer. So those are 2 of the smaller ones. And then this is the longer one. It's got a built-in launch lug there. And then our final tube here. Alright, here we've got a completely white parachute, and I do remember this. For a while Estes was unable to get their normally colored parachutes there. Some self-adhesive decals, 1/4-inch rubber shock cord. Now I'm going to check this since this is an older kit. Sometimes the rubber may have deteriorated. I'm not seeing any cracks when I stretch it, so that should still be good. And then we've got this plastic bag here and a nose cone. So the nose cone is as it should be. And then this has the fins and then the connections that allow us to put the various body tubes together here. Alright, the fin can has a bayonet type retainer ring on it. So it looks like we have everything, and we'll just kind of set some of this aside for the moment while we move on into our instructions here. Okay, so the first thing is to assemble the fin unit, so we don't need those at the moment. Pull this out of the way. Alright, so they're using a tube type plastic cement like this. You can also use a brush on cement, and I think I'm going to do that because this is some pretty fine work here. There's not a lot of surface area to work with. So I'm using this. This one's made by Tamiya. There are other brands as well, and it comes in different consistencies. So this is a really runny one. I've also got this one here that's a little bit thicker, and then if you need thicker still, you can use the tube type. As I said, I like this runny stuff for this type of a job. Alright, so I'm going to come over here. Yep, I want the knob. So on one side we've got some little tiny pegs sticking up, and those go into these little depressions or holes here. It looks like it's got holes on one side and pegs on the other. So I'm going to take my cement here and I'm going to go all along these edges that will come together. Okay, along here as well. Now the drawback to this really runny stuff is that it dries really quickly, and sometimes it starts drying before you're even ready for it. Okay, so we'll do that. Now we're just going to put the 2 halves together here. Okay, and I'm going to hold this for about 60 seconds to make sure everything glues together, and then I'll come back. My fin assembly has dried enough that we can work with it, and so next we're going to assemble the lowest part of the rocket. Okay, so that's this, and the launch lug here is actually facing forward on this. The aft end is back here. This is where we're going to attach the fins. And I'm just going to do this as friction fit first to make sure it's going to work. Now this has got a couple of little knobs sticking up here. It's just a little piece of flash, I think. I'm just going to take my knife and just trim that off. Okay, and that's the only really prominent part there. Now they're using the tube type plastic cement for this, which is fine. For gluing plastic to non-plastic, I actually prefer the gel type super glue. Either one will work though, so whatever you have on hand. And then all these screw couplers here they came screwed together, so we're going to need a female one, which will be this one here at the top, and we're going to glue both of these in the same way. The main thing here that we need to worry about is when we put the fin assembly in place, this should go between two of the fins so that the launch rod won't get hung up. Alright, so here I'm just going to put in kind of a regular bead here of the super glue. Again, you can use the tube type plastic cement. You just want an even bead. You don't need a whole lot of stuff in there. Okay, and now once again I'm going to go ahead and put this in and then move it back and forth to get a good bind there. And I'm simply going to look down between the two fins and make sure that my launch lug is centered in between two of them. Okay, now on the other side we're going to do the same thing with the female connector. So again, I'm using the gel super glue here. You can use the tube type cement. Okay, and put my coupler in here, and again I'm just going to turn it back and forth a little bit to get a good seat of the glue. Alright, now I'm just going to set this part aside and let it dry. Next I'm going to put together the other three body tubes. Now for two of them they're going to be set up the same way with the male coupler on one end and the female coupler on the other. The third one, this will be the one that has the nose cone in it. Okay, and so that's going to have a male coupler and then no coupler at the other end. The nose cone will go there. I'm actually going to do that one first. So the same way, I'm going to use the gel super glue. You can use the tube type cement as well. Alright, and then we're just going to put this in, give it a turn back and forth, set it aside to dry. And now my other two will each get a male and a female coupler, and exactly how we just did this. Now I'm going to let everything dry for about 5 minutes before we go on. A few minutes have passed and we can go on to work on the shock cord mount. Now they don't specifically tell us here, but this is going to go into the body tube that will have the nose cone on it. So at this point it's the body tube that only has the male coupler and not the female coupler. We can cut this out if you don't want to destroy your instructions, and let's also make sure we're not needing anything on the other side. If you don't want to destroy your instructions here, go ahead and just make a photocopy of this page and then you can cut that out. But there's really nothing we need on the other side. Now for this we're going to want some wood glue or white glue, and we need our shock cord here. Now if you see how they do it, alright, what they're going to do is apply glue, alright, and then we run the shock cord straight up the mount, fold the 1 over the 2 and the 2 over the 3, and the problem with that is that you have 2 thicknesses of this rubber then right on top of each other, and that tends to make it bulge inward a little bit where possibly the parachute might get hung up. And so 2 ways you can overcome this. One is you mount the shock cord at a bit of an angle so that when we fold this side up it lays beside the other one. I like this trick that a viewer told me about, and I really found it useful, is you can take the shock cord and make a fork cut in it here that's about the same length as section 2 here. And what you'll do, in fact that's a little uneven, I'm going to trim that off a little bit there. And now what I'll do when I go to glue this is I'm going to spread that forked part apart here like that. And then when I fold 2 over the 3, most of the thickness goes to either side. Okay, so however way you prefer to do that, you can go with. So I'm going to lay down a bead of glue here after we unclog it. Fancy glue dispenser still gets clogged up. Okay, so you want a fair amount of glue on this because at the end we want kind of a glue laminate so that we have layers of glue and paper here. You're going to get a little messy. Okay, so here again I'm going to move my 1 over onto the 2. Okay, I'll go ahead and spread some more glue around here. We really don't want anything that does not have glue on it. So we want glue nice and even there. Now I'm going to do the 2 over the 3, and now those 2 forks, for the most part, are on either side of my shock cord there. Okay, now I'm going to put a bend in this so the the convex side is here, and this is what's going to come in contact with the inside of the tube. I'm going to put a little more glue on here and kind of spread that evenly. And now, I'll wipe my fingers off just a moment. What we'll do is stick that down inside the tube, and it needs to go in, they show 1 inch. I recommend at least 1.5 inches. The farther you can get this down, the better. So if you have thick, stubby fingers, find somebody with longer fingers to help stuff this down. Alright, so I'm going to kind of lower it down in there. I'm going to flip it over. Now the glue side is on there, and I'm holding this like this. The shock cord mount is right here, and I'm just going to take my finger and press it down so that I'm sandwiching it between my finger and my hand, and that's going to get it as flat as possible. And I'm squeezing out all the air bubbles and getting that nice and flat so that now when we look down in there, there's not a lot sticking up into the body tube itself. Okay, and we'll set this aside to let that dry for a while. Next I'm going to assemble the parachute and attach the shock cord and the parachute to the nose cone here. So the first thing we need to do is just cut out this little bit of flash from inside the nose cone loop there, that little eyelet. Don't cut the eyelet itself. Now, they're doing it a little bit differently than most models. So what we're doing here is the end of the shock cord is going through the eyelet, and this is a pretty thick shock cord, so that's filling up most of what's there. And then instead of tying the parachute to the eyelet like normally happens, they're going to tie the parachute onto the shock cord itself. Okay, so you can do it that way. If you've seen my other videos, I like to use snap swivels on my parachutes, mainly because it allows you to change them out easily, but also, at least theoretically, it helps them keep from getting quite as twisted up as they're coming down. With little guys like these, that's kind of less of an issue than simply the ease of changing out. But this eyelet's going to be kind of full. Okay, and snapping this onto the shock cord can be done, but I would be a little bit worried about this edge right here cutting into it. Okay, so what I'm going to recommend is either do it the way they do it and tie the parachute to the shock cord, okay, just as they show here. The other way is to extend this a little bit. So basically make a bigger eyelet, and that's what I'm going to do here. So here I have a little bit of Kevlar cord. I think this is about 150 pound test. Any size will do as long as you can get it in there. And all I'm going to do is put a loop of this in. So just pass that through and kind of figure out, that's about enough for a loop. This isn't particularly complex, so just cut off a reasonable amount there. And now I'm just going to tie a knot in this, simple water knot or overhand knot. Alright, kind of get that knot toward the end, but leave just a little bit of free end there. And just to make sure that doesn't slip, I'm going to add just a little touch of super glue. Alright, for this I use the runny super glue, not the gel. So we just put a little drop on there, and that will hold that knot in place. Kevlar is notorious for coming unknotted because it's so smooth and slippery. Alright, and then just after a few seconds, just take a tissue or towel or rag or something here and just get rid of that excess. Okay, now that's ready to go. And so here, if you want, you can run this around so the knot is kind of up against that. You just got to be careful that the knot doesn't interfere and get on the shoulder there. However you want to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to take my shock cord here, and I'm going to tie that on with a double knot. All right, or 2 half hitches. And I've kind of got it around the other knot. Whoa, okay. That is not a good sign. It means this rubber might be a little older than I thought. Alright, so I'm going to try this again where I'm not on the knot there. The other thing that could have been happening is the Kevlar itself may have cut through the rubber. I wouldn't expect that in flight because I was pulling it a different direction than it would be normally during injection. Alright, so once you've got that on there and it's good and tight there, I'm going to go ahead and add just a little drop of white glue or wood glue here right into that knot. Just a little bit. And that's just to keep it from coming undone at an inopportune time. And since it is down below the shoulder now, we don't have to worry too much about that free end getting in the way. Okay, now I'm going to attach a snap swivel here to my parachute. And these things you can get just about any place you buy fishing supplies. So hardware stores, sporting goods stores, department stores. If they have fishing stuff, they'll probably have snap swivels. Alright, now they kind of made a mess of putting these shroud lines together. Alright, so just open up the parachute here. This is a fairly good sized parachute. And this may be another good reason to have that snap swivel, is if it's really windy out, you may not want this full parachute, or if you're shooting it as a smaller rocket, you also might want something. So this looks like an 18-inch parachute, and on a windy day, or if you've got a shorter version of the rocket going, you might want to swap it out for a 12. Okay, so what I've done here is looped all of the shroud lines around my finger, and now I'm going to grab what should be about the middle of the parachute, and what I'm doing now is allowing the chute to slip a little bit as I need to, and the shroud lines to slip a little bit, so that all of those corners should be pretty much even with each other. Alright, now, if you're doing it this way, you simply loop around the shock cord and then pass the rest of the parachute through this loop here. Alright, I am not doing it that way. Instead, we'll still get a loop, but we're going to get it really tiny, so all those loops are there. And then I'm going to pass these through the swivel end, the round end of my snap swivel. The size of the snap swivel doesn't really matter as long as you can get the shrouds through one end, and that the snap end will move about the eyelet of the nose cone freely. And since we have that little loop of Kevlar on there, that won't be a problem at all. Okay, so now I've got that hanging on the loops. Before I commit myself, I'm going to come back and check my corners once more. This is a good time to readjust it if we need to. Okay, if it's all good, then go ahead and just pass the entire snap swivel through the loops. Pull the loops downward and then pull the whole thing tight. One final check. Okay, still good there, still good here. And then once more, this isn't necessary, but I find it's just good to do, and just go ahead and put one more little drop of the glue. That's even more than I need. Okay, just a little tiny bit there to hold that knot in place. Okay, and just let that dry a few minutes, and in just a moment, when we come back, we'll put the whole rocket together. Now that the glue has had time to dry, we'll go ahead and put all this together. So I'm going to take my snap swivel here, and I'm just going to put it onto my Kevlar and snap that closed. Okay, so pull all that down. Now if you're prepping this for launch, go ahead and put down probably around anywhere from 4 to 6 pieces of recovery wadding into this section here. We'll normally have it all put together if we're actually prepping for launch. If you're just doing this to put it away, you can use the same method, but you don't need the wadding. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is take my parachute and kind of spread it open again. And now I'm going to bring the corners together so that we've got this folded in half and the 3 corners all on one side. So there's my middle corners there, and I've got another, unfold that a little bit, okay, and another set of corners here. So starting with the middle corners, I'm going to take one of the 2 side sets of corners here, and I'm going to bring that up and over and overlay that on the center corners like this. Okay, flatten everything out, and then do the same thing with the other side. I'll bring those corners over. So now all the corners are stacked up right here, and we've got this kind of inverted kite looking shape. Alright, now I'm going to take the shroud lines, extend those out, and then about halfway here, bring those up as a loop. So we have just a little bit hanging down here. Alright, now take one side and fold that over about that far. Take the other side and fold it over the other way so that now the edges meet again. Take the vertex here, the pointy part, and you're going to put that down here toward the corners again. Okay, and then we're just going to kind of roll this in from the edges until we have a nice cylinder here. Okay, and as wide as this is, I'm going to give it one more fold. Okay, now the shock cord will now go inside here. It'd be on top of the recovery wadding if you're prepping for launch. And you can just kind of stuff it down. That's followed by the parachute and by all the rest of the knickknacks there. Okay, nose cone goes on, and then shake it. Now that nose cone is coming out of its own volition there with just a little shake. And this is going to change depending on temperature and humidity and things like that. But if it is loose the way it is, try adding a little bit of masking tape to the shoulder. You're not taping the nose onto the rocket. We're just adding a little friction here and a little bit of thickness. Okay, and that should be enough. So now I can shake this. Does not come off, but it comes off with just a little bit of pressure. Okay, now if you want the shortest rocket, you simply take the fin section here, screw on the nose cone section, alright, and you've got about an 18-inch tall rocket. If you want it taller, you can add one or both of the extensions in the same way. Okay, and don't really crank down on these. Just turn them in basically until they stop. And you never want to use glue on this unless you want it to be permanent. And that's fine. Okay, so if you know that you always want it to be the longest possible, and you want the added protection of having this glued in place, it will run that way. You just won't be able to take it apart anymore. Okay, so now this thing is about 3 feet long. And our last thing to do then is add the decals. Now before we forget this, when we're putting on the decals, we also need to add the retainer here, and this just fits in, push and twist. Let's try this way. Push and twist. There we go. It's a little tight. That goes on like that. Okay? And then we'll finish up with the decals. The last thing for us to do is to apply the decals. And so you can use the packaging cover here as a guide. So if you want it to look like this, I highly recommend that you do this with all the pieces stuck together. That way you can use each piece as a guide for the next. Keep in mind though that this type of plastic is affected by both temperature and humidity. So you may get this all nice and aligned at one point, and then maybe you go out and it's a really humid summer or something, or it's a really cold winter day, and this screws together just a little bit differently. They may not line up anymore, and that's just the way it is. Okay, this will fly just fine without decals. You can use your own decals of different types. You can paint this, whatever you want to do. It's your rocket. I am going to try and do something similar to what they show on the package. And the first thing I did was simply wash my hands to help eliminate fingerprints as much as I can. Okay, so here we've got the converter decal. And so this is going to go down on the bottommost portion, and it's going to look like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this around so that I'm reading in the right direction. And I'm going to put these on the opposite side from the launch lug so that hopefully when this is sitting on the launch pad you can see all the decoration there. Okay, so gently peel these off. Try to handle them by the edges as much as possible. You got to be really careful because these like to grab onto the surface really quickly, and they don't like to let go. So if you try and peel them up, you may peel up the pre-colored finish there. Alright, now I am going to use the ring itself there as kind of a guide. So the edge of this should be right on the edge of the coupler there. And I'm just going to kind of add a little tension to it, try to keep that straight. Alright, might be a little off. If I'm really gentle about it, I can pull this up again. Okay, and just try and straighten it out there. Once you've got it where you want it, then starting in the middle, go ahead and smooth this down and then work toward the outsides. Okay, and then we'll just do the same thing, working our way up each segment here, but I'm going to do that off camera. Okay, this rocket is way too tall to fit into the camera all at the same time, so here we go from nose, first section, second section, third section, tail section, and that's my Estes converter. This all went together in about an hour, and I hope you have a great time building this with me. Have a great flight and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good.
Oh. Wait, that's so good.